Hello, everybody, and welcome to September's Next Century Cities webinar. My name is Deb Sosha, and I'm the Executive Director of Next Century Cities. Today, our webinar is going to highlight 3 examples of how technology and access can address community problems. And we have 3 folks here to share the work they've been doing with cities. We have Michael Martin from Rapid SOS, which is a simple and free upgrade for cities that can aid first responders during an emergency. We have Kirk Samsel from the Center for Technology and Civic Life, which provides development and training for election officials about using tech to enhance civic engagement. John Matar from Speed Up Your City, a crowdsourced data project to help cities hold internet service providers accountable for the quality of service. Please note that as an organization, Next Century Cities is not promoting these organizations per se, but instead our hope is to provide examples of creative solutions and to discuss ways to leverage high-speed access. So a few housekeeping details. We're asking everyone to remain on mute so that we can reduce the impact of the ambient noise. If you have questions, and we really hope you will, please type them in the chat box located on the bottom right hand of your screen. You can send them out to everybody, or you can send them just to the organizers, but we will be sure to address them during the call. Additionally, we hope to hear from you if you have examples from your community. So please chat to the organizers, and we'll be happy to open up your microphone, unmute you, so that you can share your information with the group. So if you've got something cool going on that matches this topic today, we really want to hear from you. The webinar will be recorded and shared on our resource page should you want to refer back to it or if you want to share it with others. So today we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to have each of our presenters spend a few minutes talking about their projects, and then we'll go to questions. So we're going to start today with Michael Martin from Rapid SOS.
Great. Well, thanks, Deb, for having us here. And I'm actually managed to be in D.C. today, so I'm joined sitting next to Deb. It's a privilege to be here. So thanks, everyone, for joining. Rapid SOS, we're an advanced emergency tech startup. We were formed about 3.5 years ago as grad students at Harvard, MIT, and Stanford that had some personal experiences around the challenges with emergency communication. So we've spent the last 3.5 years working very closely with thousands of dispatch centers, public safety answering points all over the United States to figure out how we can universally push data into your existing systems. And so for framework, basically what we are, and I realize now, I think we had excuse the slides there, I think I had a challenge converting PowerPoint onto a Mac version, so some of the slides will be a little different. But basically, we are a free software patch that will precisely locate every single wireless call on your existing system today. So as most of you know today, most 911 calls come in with a very broad estimate of location today. So typically, immediately, it's just the cell tower address. So you have sometimes a few kilometers of accuracy. And then on about a 30-second delay, you get a broad estimate, typically more in the 50-meter accuracy range. So what we provide through various industry partners is an ability to precisely locate those wireless calls. And again, this technology is actually already installed on most of your citizen smartphones. Roughly 65% of smartphones in the United States have this technology today, and we are working with the major manufacturers there to basically pre-install this on every single smartphone. So just to take a quick step back, as many of you know, every single day in the United States, we have about 500,000 Americans that are calling 911 for help. And each of those calls is going through a system that really dates back to the 1970s and was built originally for landline phone calls. So in this day and age where we have users that are mobile that are not tied to a physical address, you get a real challenge locating those calls. And so you get places like the New York Times writing about some of these challenges, TechCrunch talking about how challenging it is to locate wireless callers in emergencies. I'll just give one more example from Harvard Business School where the one-pager on safety and security actually tells students that no matter where you are on campus, when you call 911, you should just tell them you're at the library 25 Harvard Way. Then you should basically hang up with 911, call Harvard University Police at a second 10-digit number to tell them where you're actually located on campus, and then they will meet first responders. They'll send the ambulance to the library and escort them to wherever they are on campus. The FCC estimates that because we can't locate these callers, we lose over 10,000 lives every single year in this country. So this is something that I mentioned that touched my family personally. It's touched our core founding team personally. And so we've been spending the last 3.5 years working with 911 dispatch centers all over the United States and working with the largest device manufacturers to figure out how we can universally push this data into your jurisdictions all over the United States. And obviously, as you know, we're at a time where there's a need for personal safety and security more than ever. We have a sexual assault every 6.5 minutes, a violent crime every 27 seconds. We're approaching the highest rate of mass shootings in our country's history. I mentioned over 250 million 911 calls a year in this country, 80% or close to 180 million calls coming from cell phones. So, you know, we live in this day and age where smartphones have transformed our lives. Sitting in our pockets today is precise location, real-time health and medical information, camera feed, voice, texting, video conferencing, language translation, all these capabilities except when our lives on the line. And then your dispatchers do extraordinary work helping your constituents in some of the most challenging circumstances of their lives with only voice. And that's where we think there's such an opportunity to better plug this in. Because our slide got a little messed up here, I'll just skip over this. But we're about 30 folks today based in New York, backgrounds in building tech startups, Google, Microsoft, Oracle, Argonne, Oak Ridge National Labs, great advisors across the 911 community, the telecom space, the medical and academic space, and with some other municipalities. So this technology, as I mentioned, was developed over the last 3.5 years. We've done over 100,000 calls across the United States. We're partnered with groups like the White House Data-Driven Justice Initiative, the City of Cambridge, et cetera. So today, actually, via a mobile application, this technology can actually plug directly into your system. So we are partnered with places like Cambridge, Massachusetts, where we provide this app for free to their constituents. And then coming into your system, again, is precise location, the type of help that caller needs, obviously a robust voice link, and simultaneously we can allow your constituents to send text messages in. And all this is through your existing enhanced 911 system. So there's no new required equipment or cost for your PSAP, and generally very minimal training required for your operators as well. So it basically looks like a landline phone call to them. Just to show you what this looks like, and I think actually some folks from Boston are on the phone here. So these are side-by-side calls that we made with the City of Boston. The left side is a what's called a phase 1 wireless call. So this came through in Boston. So again, you'll see this was on Verizon's network, so the 1-800 number to call to get the more information. Here's the caller's phone number and the address of the cell tower, 87 Terrace Way. We're hitting the northeast sector here, right? So the accuracy here was about 700 meters on this particular, at least initial call. Obviously, we come in with the caller's precise name, their actual location, the type of help they need, and the lat long of the caller. Again, just to show the difference here, in this case, you were getting accurate location. We were accurate to about 5 meters inside the Boston Police Department versus where the wireless call placed us about 700 meters away. So this is why the FCC talks about all the lives that are impacted every single day because of this challenge. So here's a sample of the calls we've already done over the last 30 days. Again, about 100,000 calls over the United States. Obviously, time really matters in these emergencies, so there's a lot we can do to accelerate that for you. We're working with organizations across the country to provide this service for free to those in need, and we would love to work with all of you to do the same. So 3 pieces of technology here. The first 2 are already pre-installed on devices all over the United States. The last one is the application. So if you want to receive just precise location in your dispatch center from every single one of your wireless 911 calls, it's already on your constituents' phones, and we just need you to install a software patch. It's free. It's provided by our partners, so the largest 911 software vendors. And then if you're interested, we'd love to talk to you about our full application that we also are partnering with 5 cities as part of the White House Data-Driven Justice Initiative. We're partnering to provide that service for free to all of your constituents. And this is, again, is how we can provide a link for more health, medical information, texting, some supplemental data beyond just location. So again, we're converting kind of this broad estimate of where you're located to your precise caller's location. So in summary, we can precisely locate every single caller. We can do this in a way that creates faster, more effective emergency response, and obviously this is at no cost to you. It's actually pre-installed on your constituents' phones. Don't have time to get into the data, but on a follow-up, we can share some of the impact on your communities, but it is about a 2 to 10% reduction in mortality rates and life-threatening emergencies, obviously safer schools and communities, an estimate of over 10,000 lives saved annually. So please get in touch. You can email me directly. I'm one of the founders, or go to rapidsos.com/city or /municipality. We'll get you some additional data. So thank you, Deb, and I'll take questions afterwards.
Yep, we're going to take questions after the 3 presentations. That was great. Thank you, Michael. We're going to go to Kurt from the Center for Technology and Civic Life.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. Looks like you can. Go ahead and get started with my presentation today. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the election toolkit. Next slide, please. Can you go back a slide, please? Back 2. Thanks. Okay, that's me. Good, thank you. So I want to take just a quick moment to introduce myself. My name is Kurt Samsel, and I'm Government Services Associate with the Center for Technology and Civic Life. I personally have been with the organization since the summer of 2015, last year. And prior to that, I was working as a teacher and researcher at Carnegie Mellon University, where I earned my PhD in the field of cultural studies in 2015. Next slide, please. Great. On behalf of Center for Technology and Civic Life, we're a nonprofit. We're based in Chicago. That's where I'm calling from today. And our mission is to increase people's access to important civic information. It's our belief that when people have civic information, they're more likely to engage in their communities. And we see tech as the sort of critical conduit that can get that information from governments to people. So we go about our mission in 2 ways. Our civic data team collects and publishes our nation's largest civic data sets that answer the questions, what's on my ballot, and who are my elected officials? And to date, that data has been accessed actually over 60 million times, which is incredible. And our government services team, which I'm a part of, focuses on training election officials to develop tech skills that will ultimately help them better serve their communities. Next slide, please. Great. So helping election officials explore new technologies is a big part of what inspired the election toolkit. And I want to be clear that the toolkit was a collaborative effort. We at CTCL worked with the Center for Civic Design, as well as 3 election offices from left to right here. The Cook County Clerk in Illinois, the Hillsborough County Supervisor of Elections in Florida, and the Inyo County Clerk, Recorder, and Registrar of Voters in California. It was really important for us to work with urban, suburban, and rural governments in order to understand their different needs and to create a resource that would be useful regardless of a government's budget or size. And together we all made our pitch to the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation's News Challenge on Elections in the spring of 2015. Next slide, please. So the News Challenge funds breakthrough ideas about improving civic life in the United States. It's funded by the Knight Foundation, as well as the Democracy Fund, the Hewlett Foundation, and the Rita Allen Foundation. And the prompt for the challenge was broad because they wanted, on purpose, to fund lots of different approaches to the question. And the question was, how might we better inform voters and increase civic participation before, during, and after elections? So we put together the toolkit as our proposal, submitted the proposal, and a few months later we found out that we were selected. So a bit of good news. Next slide, please. So what is the toolkit? I want to go ahead and address that clearly. The toolkit is a resource library of free or low-cost technologies that are intended to help solve problems of civic engagement. Now, to build it, we asked folks from governments around the country to tell us about technologies they recommended or ones that they wished they had. Then we sort of narrowed them down, we did research on them, and we created step-by-step instructions for them so that anybody, regardless of your technical background, can just pick up a tool and basically start using it immediately. We understand that folks who work in government are smart, they're hardworking, they're dedicated, but it's just a fact that because of time, staffing, and budget pressures, they often just don't have time to experiment with new technologies, to discover what's out there. And so for the toolkit, we've sort of done the hard work of curating and testing those technologies. And we're presenting them in a way that's completely non-commercial, non-partisan, and that's accessible really to everybody. Next slide, please. So this is what the toolkit looks like. We launched in June with 11 tools, and we just recently added a 12th that we're pretty excited about. Now, some of the tools are high-tech and some are low-tech. Some are definitely specific to elections, but others can be used by anybody in government, a civic organization, or an advocacy group. I want to breeze through just 2 quick examples of how people have used some of the tools before I mention how you in the audience can get involved in helping us develop the toolkit. Next slide. So our first example is from Arapahoe County, which is part of a pretty tech-savvy region in Colorado. In fact, Arapahoe County is home to Centennial, Colorado, which is one of the member cities for Next Century Cities. So in Arapahoe, they're using the voter wait time measurement tool to measure voter wait times. And what they did is they built a website to actually report the wait to the public. Next slide. So this is the website they created to report the wait times basically as they come in. So GIS Administrator Dominic Cizon had this to say about the tool that they used. He said, "I think it will work well in election day and will provide a level of reporting that wouldn't be possible without the constant manual reporting of wait times." He says, "If this configuration works well, no doubt we will iterate its design and improve its performance and repeatability in future elections." So what we really like about this example is how the Arapahoe staff built on the tool to kind of make it suit their needs. As it's described in the toolkit, this tool is basically a simple data collection tool, a way to measure voter wait times. But with the expertise of their team, they decided to build it into a dynamic display to actually provide that information to voters. So this helps voters choose when and where to vote, because Colorado is a place that has largely vote centers, so you can kind of vote anywhere. But on top of that, it helps administrators get data on wait times so that they can improve their processes if they decide that such improvements are needed. Next slide, please. Okay, and here's Shasta County in California. They are using our collection of civic icons and images. This is a really low-tech, but still, we believe, a very powerful communication tool. And it's powerful because not only do our brains process images just so much faster than text, but at a time when skimming online has become our sort of default approach to reading things, icons are powerful because they can grab the eye and direct our attention to the pieces of content that are most important. Next slide. So that was the idea behind this voter guide that Shasta County made for their presidential primary last June. Basically, it explains the process for voting by mail, which is something that election staff wanted to make sure was just crystal clear to their voters. So Allison D'Onofrio, who is the Assistant County Clerk and Register of Voters there, saw the value of using civic icons to kind of tell the story and show how the process works. So here's what she said. She said, "Cartoon strips tell a story in a sequence. They're easy for voters to follow and understand." So in effect, they were able to communicate that important information very straightforwardly. For us, this example shows how government officials can use a tool in a way that makes the most sense for their area, basically, based on their local processes, their local needs, and so on. Next slide. So as I wrap up, I do want to mention how you in the audience can contribute. Even though the toolkit is launched, like I said, we launched it in June, that's not the same as saying that it's done. We envision the toolkit as very much of a living, growing resource that we want to improve and adapt so that it continues to meet the needs of both election officials and other civically minded folks. So here are some ways that you can become part of that process and contribute to the toolkit's growth. So first, simply check it out. check out the toolkit. You can find it at electiontools.org. We also really like for people to bookmark their favorite tools. This is a way for us to identify which tools are especially popular. We want you, of course, to use the tools and to share your experience. And yes, that could be both a positive or a negative experience. If you have feedback or suggestions for us, we would like to hear that. One way that you can share your experience is to talk about the tools on Twitter. We've been using throughout the process the hashtag #ElectionTools. So feel free to look at that, see how people have been talking about it, and contribute to the discussion yourself. And also you can contribute by suggesting ideas or requests for new tools. Like I showed in the process slide, the way that we put this toolkit together was by asking people for their suggestions, asking folks in local government if they had something that worked really well for them that they wanted to share with others, or if they had something that would just really help out their processes and do something that they needed to have done. So I want to go ahead and thank NCC. Thank you so much for involving me in the webinar. And thanks, Deb, for inviting my organization to participate.
Well, thank you as well. And as somebody who stood in line for 2.5 hours to vote in the last presidential election, I'd love to have known how long that line was going to be before I left work that day. So, okay, thanks. And again, don't forget to shoot us some questions. We have a couple already, but please do send some more questions. We're going to turn it over to John from Speed Up Your City. John, you there?
Yes. Thanks,
okay,
Deb.
Thanks.
My name is John Mader. I'm a software entrepreneur and CEO of Speed Up Your City. And this is a tool that helps local governments collect information on internet speeds and internet service providers in their community. Next. So I'm located in Louisville, Kentucky, and Louisville had a problem. They lacked, and I'm sure other cities have the same type of problem, where they lacked internet data on what speeds the city was getting and transparency on internet service providers. Are the service providers giving the citizens what they are paying for? As a citizen of Louisville, I really didn't know if I was getting what I was paying for from Time Warner Cable or not. So that was a real problem, and there was no way to access this data. So the solution is a website called speeduplouisville.com, and it's a speed test that allows citizens to input information about their internet service provider, test their speed, and then see if they're getting what they're actually paying for, and all of the data is open. So I'll show you how it works. Next. So Louisville citizens go to speeduplouisville.com, and they simply take the test. And down at the bottom, you click Take the Test. Next. You put in your internet service provider, so I have Time Warner Cable. How am I connected? Typically through wireless. The price you pay per month. For me, I pay $50 a month for internet. And the speed I'm supposed to be getting, which is 50 megabytes per second of speed. And then I rank my satisfaction through the STAR system, and then I test my speed. Next. After I test my speed, I see the results. So I'm paying for 50 megabytes per second of speed, but I'm actually getting 45. Then the cool thing is the data that comes along with it from crowdsourcing this data from Louisville citizens. So below you see a map, and you can filter through Wi-Fi, mobile, public work, or all. You can filter through zip code or all responses, and you're able to see what speeds people are getting, and you're able to export all this data and try to make more sense of, are the service providers really giving your citizens what they are paying for? Is there a digital divide in my city? And next slide. So looking through some of this data, and this is all accessible at the speeduplouisville.com site, and you just look at results. So far since May, Louisville has had 3,300 speed tests submitted. You see a breakdown of residential, mobile, and worker public. Next stat. Here's a map that shows participation by zip code. So Louisville let out press releases and got a lot of people to take the test. But if you notice over on the west end of town, not a lot of people were able to participate, which is showing a digital divide, which the local government thought there might be a digital divide in that area. And actually getting this data helps them kind of confirm some of their assumptions. Next step. You can see a breakdown of residential internet speeds. Something that I find interesting is that 17% of Louisville citizens are getting less than 5 megabytes per second of internet speed. In 2016, everybody needs access to internet for school, to find jobs, and having less than 5, there's room to improve there. Next step. You can see a breakdown of which ISPs people are using. So in Louisville, the majority of people are using Time Warner, with AT&T being the second most, and there's a lot of other third-party ones that people use. And then next stat. And even breaks down the value that, or the service value that AT&T and Time Warner are giving the citizens. As you can see, Time Warner is giving much better value per dollar spent than AT&T. And next step. You can look at residential speeds between AT&T and Time Warner. You see that almost half of people using AT&T are getting less than 10 megabytes per second of speed. And if you go to the speeduplouisville.com, there are tons of stats, and all of this is in real time. Next stat. Oh, I think that's it. So the results from Louisville, shortly after releasing speeduplouisville.com, Time Warner Cable announced doubling internet speeds across the city. Not to say that Speed Up Your City was a reason for this, but being able to actually collect this data is really important to being able to have a case against a service provider. And just all the positive results that came from the speeduplouisville.com initiative resulted in other cities and counties contacting us. So now we license this software out to other cities and counties where we can create a speeduplexington.com or a Speed Up Your City, whatever it may be, customize it for you. You can promote it to your citizens and get this type of data on your community. So if you're interested in a demo of the product or have any questions, feel free to contact me. That's it.
Thanks, John. John, while we have you, I'm going to ask a question, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Well, first, I want to mention that I understand you're going to be doing Speed Up Montgomery County first. Is that true?
Yes.
Awesome.
We're creating that one right now.
Yep.
It should be out in the next week or two.
We actually have somebody from Montgomery County on the call today who said, make sure you mention it. So there you go.
Okay.
What I'd like to ask you while I have you on is, can you give us a sense of what the cost is and how long would it take to set up if my city wanted to participate?
Yes. If you're wanting the same type of application as speeduplouisville.com, it's $2,500 setup fee, and that's for us to customize images, text, the map, the internet service providers, to get the domain for you. We handle everything with that setup, and then it's $4,800 a year, so $400 a month, with a minimum of 1 year. So for $7,300, you can have the Speed Up Your City tool for a year. And with that, we can complete this in 7 to 30 days, depending on how responsive the client that we're working with is on approving images and text and giving us the information we need to get the site up and running.
Thank you. That's great. And Kurt, just to check in with you, is your toolkit free to use? And what parts of the toolkit would you recommend for non-election folks?
Sure, the toolkit is free. We describe it as having free and low-cost tools. We say that because there are 2 of the tools that have some cost associated with them, but the cost is really minimal, and for one of the tools, it's completely avoidable. So for the most part, it is free. And I think tools that are in the toolkit that would be especially helpful for folks who are not working in election administration would be some of our communication tools. Probably that's more than any other category of tool is the communication tools. We have one that helps you communicate via text messages, mass texts, how to create quick sort of 30-second or minute how-to videos. That's our video one-on-one tool. and also some of those civic icons and images and our infographic design tool. All of those, I think, would be really helpful for anybody working on a civic engagement task.
Yep. I have to say I went in and looked around in there, and there were a lot of tools that I could see as being very valuable. Michael, let me check in with you. Again, I know you've already mentioned that it's free, but how would folks get engaged with you? And, you know, would there be any risk to the city? Let's imagine that something goes wrong with the technology.
Yeah, great question. To get engaged with us, you can just email me directly, mmartin, M-M-A-R-T-I-N, @rapidsos.com, or just go to rapidsos.com/city. You'll see a form you can fill out to get the free software patch, or if you want to be considered for one of the 5 cities that we're providing the more comprehensive app to for free, please get in touch with us there as well. In terms of risk, I mean, this is something that we take really seriously. This is not like any other technology, obviously. There are potentially 180 million lives a year that are in the balance based off of our ability to respond effectively to these calls. And obviously, your cities are very familiar with this, and they're managing these calls every single year. So we spent 3.5 years working very closely with the main industry bodies, NENA, APCO, with over 1,000 PSAPs across the United States to develop this technology. And I think what's essential to it ultimately is that this is a supplemental data flow. So if there was some sort of catastrophic system failure, say the internet went out, if you will, you're still going to receive voice via the carrier like you normally would. You're still going to receive at least the cell tower location. So again, this is simply a way to get precise location in for every one of your wireless calls. But if there ever was a failure, you would be no worse off than you are today.
All right. And so I have one other question about that, and that is, you're saying there's no cost to folks. Is that a forever thing, or they get involved with you, and then a year from now they get charged? Is that how does it work?
Yep. So ordinary citizens obviously do subscribe to our service just like you would to an OnStar or a home security service. This is basically taking those capabilities, putting it in your pocket, and creating faster, more effective response. We don't need a third-party call center in India, for example, to route this data, but we will provide it for free to our partner municipalities. There will never be any charge to receive precise location for wireless calls. That is forever a commitment. And then if you want to provide the app for free to your citizens, we typically make a 5 to 10 year initial commitment around that, and then we reevaluate after that time period based off of the engagement level and the partnership.
Okay, great. And we have a question for John. The question is, so you can't measure folks who don't have internet, correct? In other words, they can't report from work that they have no internet at home. Is that accurate? Did you catch that, John?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes,
no problem,
that is correct. We do have the participation map, which can give you some insight into where people are not able to access the internet, but it doesn't have that capability to say, I don't have internet. Now, we can customize the application for cities, and if there's ideas that need to be spread across all of our city partners, we add those in for free based on feedback. But there could be a way to, if somebody's at work and they're on it, there could be a question on the work tab that asks, do you have internet connection at your home or something like that. So if there is ideas on ways to add in functionality that will, bring in more value to the cities, we're all about adding more features and functionality to the current system.
Right. It's pretty hard to measure that number in general. But let me ask you another question. So when folks are using, when you deployed, say, in Louisville, how did you get people to know about this? I mean, how did people know to go there? What did the city do? What did you do to generate interest?
Yes. So the first way was traditional PR, letting the city know and letting the news outlets know that this system is in place, the site's up and running. And then there's a lot of different messages, but, you know, having that message of helping Louisville improve the internet service, everybody wants faster internet. It's a message that, you know, can spread. There was a lot of chatter on Twitter and social media once this came out. And then once the data started becoming available, once we had, you know, over 1,000 responses, there was a news site that started reporting on the actual data, the information that was coming back. And then Louisville also has us running some targeted ad campaigns on social media for them as well to help bring in even more responses. So there's, you know, traditional PR, running some ad campaigns if you choose to do so. It just depends on how well of a, you know, partnership you have with the local news outlets and how much they'll help you promote it.
Right, that sounds great. And it's possible, of course, they could go to the toolkit that Kurt's creating in the cities and learn a little bit about how to get that engagement happening. So I'll go to Kurt. Can you tell me what other kinds of government officials and advocates you've seen using your toolkit?
Sure. We've been reflecting on this a lot lately because tomorrow is National Voter Registration Day, when a lot of people are holding registration drives. So we've been hearing from a lot of folks who have been preparing registration drives in their area. I'm thinking, for instance, of we had a director of student life at a state university in Indiana get in touch with us. Somebody who's working for a community health center in the Mississippi Delta area, and also somebody in the state of Georgia who's working with a voting advocacy group. So these are kind of examples of people who are not, you know, not election administrators in terms of working in governments, but they still have an interest in working to engage the public and promote voting and promote civic engagement.
Right, and so if folks here get engaged in this and use this, how might they recommend new tools for the toolkit?
Well, it's like I said, I think we're always looking for new ideas for tools. There are currently 12, but needless to say, there are any number of different challenges of civic engagement that are kind of still out there that we don't yet have tools for solving, and we'd love to hear from folks who have ideas. Like I said, either something that you personally have in your office that you like and recommend, or something that you kind of wish you had. So if you go to the Election Toolkit website, again, the address is electiontools.org. You can kind of scroll all the way down to the bottom of that homepage to look for the word suggestions. And there's a kind of easy, simple form for you to submit your idea. You can just sort of provide your name, where you're writing from, and the basic sketch of what you want to suggest for us to include, and we'll take a look at that.
That's great. You know, we have a real interest at Next Century Cities in civic engagement, and have created and are implementing an award program called the Benton Civic Engagement Award, Next Generation Civic Engagement Award, and we're working with 3 cities on how they can use technology to enhance civic engagement. So this feels like a nice connection. And I'd love to see some of the things our cities are creating, actually those tools end up in your toolbox as well. So we'll certainly keep connected around that. So let's turn back to Michael for a moment. And you know, some of the technology that you're describing is a bit complex, and I would like to know if you can give me a little bit more information about the difference between the app and the software patch.
Yeah, definitely. So we have 2 core technologies. One is just an ability to locate every single wireless caller. So this is, as we talked about earlier, 180 million calls a year across the United States, none of which can be precisely pinpointed location. So with a simple software update, we will allow you to locate by Q1 of next year, likely about 85% of those callers, so over 160 million calls across the United States. And if you want to also receive some supplemental information from your constituents, such as relevant health or medical information, if you'd like them to be able to text into your dispatch center, again, at no cost to you, we can do all that as well through the application. So the application provides additional functionality around medical demographic information, even live video feed if you're interested. And that is the one that we provide to your citizens for free.
And can you tell me how many calls you've managed through your system?
Yep. So we officially launched in June of this past summer, but we've been out testing the service for about 2 years now. So we've now managed over 100,000 calls across the United States. We actually did a beta release initially to over 5,000 law enforcement and public safety officials across the United States. So this is a technology that's been in the works for the last 3.5 years.
That's awesome. Let's go back to John for a moment. And John, can you tell us a little bit more about the results you were able to share with Louisville? And how were they,
yes.
and John, maybe also explain how Louisville then used that data to help improve service.
Okay. And I'll talk kind of broadly about the value. Being able to have a benchmark of here is where our internet is today. Here's what the speeds people are getting, and here's what the service providers we have are giving to the citizens. Whenever you have these strategies in place to increase internet speeds or to just make your digital equity more valuable, if you are doing things, it's hard to know what kind of effect those things are having if you don't have this data. So being able to at least get some benchmark data of here's where we're at, here's what we're going to do to bring fiber into this area because it's lacking, proper service or whatever it may be. And then once those strategies are implemented, seeing what kind of effect that had by having this data available, I think is the big value with what we're providing.
Right. So if you were to give us sort of a short pitch, under what circumstances would a city want to reach out to you, and sort of what would you see as the greatest value in terms of how that data gets used? Not specifically.
Maybe talking to cities that are looking to bring in fiber, to do fiber initiatives. Even people that have already laid out fiber, they really don't know what kind of impact they're having. They still don't even have this basic data of what type of internet speeds people are getting off of the fiber line or off of an internet service provider in town. So you're doing things blindly without being able to look at the data that's coming back. What were speeds before you implemented a fiber initiative, and what happened after you did that? It's hard to make decisions or to know if the decisions you're making are the appropriate ones if you don't have basic data coming back to you. So just full open data, making your city smarter, these data points are not accessible without a tool like this.
Right. It seems to me like you'd be able to get baseline data, have an intervention, then review your outcome, and know where your strengths and weaknesses were. It also seems to me it might be helpful to determine the outcome of, say, an intervention in the parts of your city that are having low uptake of internet use, right? Like it could be a way to check out your digital equity efforts.
Correct, exactly. And then even if you're having conversations with your internet service providers, having actual data to come to the meeting with, is always useful, whatever goes on behind closed doors. But whenever you tell a service provider this is what's happening, it's hard to back it up unless you have some of this data that we're producing.
Right. So So I got a message that just came in that said that's exactly what they're using it for in Louisville, is to really check out what impact their interventions are having on digital equity issues within the city. So
yeah.
Sounds like a great way to do that. Kurt, when you're doing all this work, what kind of data are you collecting?
We collect a lot of data as far as who comes to the Toolkit website. For instance, we just recently finally penetrated the last 2 or 3 states in the United States that hadn't visited it since our launch. It got to be pretty popular in a handful of states very early on, but then there were just a few holdouts. We finally have had visitors from every single state in the union, which we're pretty happy about. We also collect information on people who request our templates. A few of the communication tools are visual communication tools. So they use, for instance, like infographic templates that we've designed. So when people request our templates, we sort of get in touch with them and ask how they found out about the toolkit and ask about what kind of communication or civic engagement goals they have. So it's largely kind of back-end analytics work as how we keep track of how people are using the toolkit, and of course anecdotes and talking to folks.
Right, right. And so, Michael, I'm going to ask you the same question. What kind of data are you collecting, and what have you learned from that data? And what kind of data could a city expect to be able to receive based on RapidSOS?
Yeah, so we have, or will be aggregating the largest database of exactly when and where emergencies are occurring across the United States. And our team's background is in predictive analytics and machine learning. My co-founder did his PhD at MIT on that. So we will be actually turning this knowledge of exactly when and where emergencies are occurring to try to predict some of them, particularly car accidents and certain types of health emergencies before they occur. So we've signed up to do some of that as part of the White House Data-Driven Justice Initiative. We're also doing some work with the Harvard School of Public Health on that. So we can help cities understand when and where their emergencies are occurring. So as they think about resource staging, resource allocation, and longer term, we are working towards driving a whole paradigm shift here. So for the last 100 years, we've thought about emergency response in one way. Emergencies happen, we place a phone call, and we try to get help for them. But we think that with this data, we are actually going to move the paradigm to one of prediction and preemption for those events.
Oh, cool. I know that Louisville was doing a lot of data collection around asthma rates and weather events and the air quality. And I could imagine this could be really helpful to have in addition to that data.
Yeah, one example we often look at is if it's snowing out. We all know you drive differently because the snow is a visual clue that the road is slicker. But what if it's raining at a certain rate, if traffic is at a certain density area, if you're at a certain stretch of highway or wider pools, and you see hydroplaning, more accidents in certain micro-weather conditions. So we have access to that information, and again, we're working on building those statistical models as we speak.
And that would be interesting for a city in that, one, they'd know where to deploy. They could predict the issues as they're coming. And I can imagine that it would vary by where in the country you are.
Absolutely. It's the predictive power is done at kind of a 100 square foot-ish kind of regional area. So it's very micro-based.
Right, because logically, we'd have a very different reaction to an inch of snow here in D.C. than we do in Boston.
Yep.
And I know Anne's on the call today, so she's probably laughing about that. So understanding that, you know, local conditions really matter, and the more hyper-local the information is, the better off we are as city folk. So I have no more questions on my list, and no one else has sent any others in, so we'll give it just a minute and see if any others respond. In the meantime, I'd like to say thank you to Michael, Kurt, and John. I'd also like to say that we will send to everyone who has signed up for the call contact information for the three of these gentlemen, and also we will put it in our weekly download this week so that you can connect to them directly if you're interested in hearing more. I think very important for us as an organization to really think about civic engagement, and so here are 3 tools. We hope that it was helpful to you. We thank you all for joining us today. It was really a robust conversation, and I hope you found it as helpful as I did. Thanks for sharing your projects with our members. If you're interested in contacting them, we'll make sure you have that information. Our next webinar will be in October, and the draft topic at this point is the Community Reinvestment Act and how it may be helpful to our members who are looking to build broadband infrastructure. So I think that's it. We're a little bit early. I hope that worked well for you. Have a great day.